time. I hope you got good answers.
So, my story was a little bit different. I was born in Rio Piedra, Puerto Rico.
I couldn't tell.
um, and my parents came to New York once they were older. They were already in their 30s. My mother has studied in the University of Puerto Rico, uh, acting and dance. She had a dance company, and my father came to study in Columbia University. He ultimately got his PhD. My mother came and studied in Columbia as well. She got a master's in dance from Columbia. But I think both of them, it was kind of it was kind of funny being raised in New York because I would go home and my parents were like ultra Puerto Rican. Like we only spoke Spanish. Um, and especially my mom, she had a dance group. So, I was always around bomba and plena
Culture.
and right. So that was like, I was already in that environment where it was like very pro Puerto Rican. My father comes from the countryside in Puerto Rico. He's from a town called Morovis. So he showed me, the humility of the Puerto Rican people, how they think about things, how they act with one another. And so that kind of came, when I started getting older and we moved to the Bronx. I still had to figure out a way to survive in the Bronx, right? Because that was a completely different atmosphere. So there was a lot of things that I couldn't tell my parents because they wouldn't have understood, right? Like for example, like when I was young, stop and frisk was at its height, right? That was what the police department was doing, and it was every week. Every week we were getting stopped by the police. Whether that was walking to the store, or going to school. Um, so that I think was formative for me later on, um, because I was like, why are we getting treated this way? Um, and that at least in my mind, I thought this injustice that I'm feeling, I have to do something about it. Um, so that ultimately led me to go to college, go to law school, become an attorney, because I wanted to come back to my community, exactly what we're doing now, right? And become a criminal defense attorney and kind of defend people who didn't have a voice. Because I knew what it felt like not having a voice, right? Where you have a system that was kind of like overbearing. But when I got older, I understood the importance of having, police in a civilized society, what it meant. And that police officers, yeah, they're trying to put food on the table. They have families too. Um, so kind of growing up in the Bronx kind of gave me like a
Dual.
right um, view of things. But in terms of myself, it's been a struggle, right? Being a Puerto Rican kid from the Bronx, a lot of people put a label on you, like, oh, you can't do certain things. So I remember, being in Lehman College and sitting down with, because I was majoring in political science, and the chair of the department telling me, you can't go to law school. I'm like, why? He's like, oh, because I'm looking at your grades, and you're not law school qualified.
Wow.
Um, so that kind of put the seed in me to say I need to do better for myself and for my community. So, um, ultimately I got through. I found once I got into law school, I found an environment of Puerto Rican lawyers and judges who kind of took me in, who were from the Bronx, and kind of mentored me. Judge Angel Cruz, who's actually a member of our lodge as well, and that kind of segued off to why we started Agüeybaná Lodge. It was kind of the same thing. It's that same struggle, right? That we came and people were like, why are you trying to start a Puerto Rican lodge, man? You're gonna hurt masonry. I heard that from some brothers saying, oh, you're gonna hurt other lodges. Um, but it was this idea that, hey, within this struggle, we're gonna do something great. We're gonna be able to come back to the community and give back. Whether that's through Little League or through the kids seeing us, but that kind of was like the mission. Um, and yeah, so in terms of how I always knew that I was gonna become a Mason. So like when in that part when they tell you, oh, where you became a Mason in your heart, I felt that that was applicable to me. I remember when I was a little kid in Puerto Rico, and I would see the square and compass in the town on a statue. And you're like, what's that? I didn't even know Puerto Ricans were Masons, right? Because you don't get taught any Puerto Rican history in school here,
yeah.
right? So who is Pedro Albizu Campo, right? Who is Dr. Betance? You know, what were their contributions? Oh, you know, Albizu Campo spoke 5 languages, and he's Puerto Rican. So it was in that curiosity, that drive, that you're like, oh, you know, we are bigger than what, you know, I've come to learn, right? Because, look, most Puerto Ricans are struggling. You know, our community is struggling. So when you start hearing of people saying, oh, this guy was a medical doctor, or this guy was a lawyer, or you start saying, wait a minute. So it's not what it seems to be. But, and actually I came in through Masonry because I had a client that we were managing a property for him. He was Greek. So I saw he had the ring, and we were talking. He's like, you want to come in? So yeah, he's like, all right, I'm going to come by and bring you a petition. So when I came into Masonry, I came into a Greek lodge, Hellenic Plato Lodge, number 1129. Ultimately, I became a master there. And then I affiliated with another Greek lodge, Parthenon Lodge, number 1101, became a master there. And, you know, that's where I really learned the universality of Masonry, that these brothers, they were Greek, had nothing to do with Puerto Rico, but they took me in and, you know, they showed me Masonry. So, you know, this allowed, that kind of all accumulated to being here now and being able to do Masonry. So that's basically, you know, the story. But look, all of this is a continuation of struggle. I think that, you know, when I look at that flag, the Puerto Rican people in general, like if you're Puerto Rican, you know what it is to struggle, whether that's because of colonialism or whatever political situation existed. The Puerto Ricans have always struggled, and I think the thing that has maintained this has been our culture, has been our identity, our music, our food, how we treat one another. So Agüeybaná is just an extension of what we've been doing for the past, you know, 300, 400, 500 years as a people. So, you know, we're gonna continue in our tradition of excellence. We're gonna continue pushing Puerto Rican culture. We're gonna keep, you know, inspiring the youth that they could do it, that they could become something bigger than what society is telling them they could be.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the hope, that Masonry is a tool, just like they show you the working tools and say, hey, this is the 24-inch gauge, this is the square, this is the level, this is the plumb. Okay, so let's take those tools, let's see how we could build, let's see how we can implement Masonry in our life, because Masonry doesn't stop once you leave that door, right? Masonry is what you do outside. So we're hoping that we can have an impact and become positive role models when we didn't see that. Because in my neighborhood, I mean, look, the people who were making money, mostly with, you know, the drug dealers, the people who were, you know, doing not good things. And you as a kid, you're saying, oh, I'm 15. Oh, I want a nice car. You know, I want a Range Rover. I want a Jaguar. They got all, you know, they got nice clothes. They got jewelry on. And you think in your mind that that's success.
Yeah.
And, you know, once you pull back the facade and you see what it really is, you're like, nah, man, I don't want to do that. There was a lot of people in my neighborhood that didn't allow me. They're like, no, stay home.
Yeah.
Don't get involved in that. That's not you. And, you know, they directed me the right way. So it was a culmination of a lot of different, you know, things that happened.
Yeah, that's when the neighborhood takes care of you a certain way, whether they value the family and the way that you're kind of perceived, and they take care of you that way, and kind of don't allow you to see certain things. It's a beautiful thing, and it just holds true to, again, culture. Some people have a ceiling, and then they take that route. And, you know, we're taught, like, as soon as you go into school, you know, college isn't really pushed on you like that. You're almost handed a set of limitations, you know, and then you see the people who are making it, right? You see the dad coming home from off the train or off the bus, you know, just making it home in time for dinner. You know, they teach us, you know, to fight to survive, but you're really not, it's not really like kind of bestowed upon you that you could also fight to thrive. You know, you make it and like, I'm here. I'm just glad to have enough to pay for school, for private school. If you're like, that's the best thing that'll happen. Like, all right, I could put my kids in private school. I made it, you know. But to live a legacy and to fight and to progress the family name and just continue to level up one generation at a time, it's a beautiful thing. And I think masonry, what's great about it is you have judges, you have a car mechanic, you have everybody kind of in the same room, and that talking amongst each other, you can find different strategies, different things. You know, you got a tax guy. Hey, did you know you could do this? Or you have another guy that, you know, I have a hookup over here. Or my wife just crashed the car, and you know, well, I got a guy who does auto body. You're not gonna get ripped off over here. You know, anything that brings people together automatically kind of is threatening to the greater whole. So it touches on what you were saying earlier about, like, you know, conspiracy theories and stuff like that. Like a lot of times and not to be all over the place, but a lot of times this fraternity is placed in that dark kind of realm because it makes good men better and it gives you a way out of what normal society would give you, right? Those barriers that are put up for lower to middle class people like us, it's it's meant to stop you. It's meant to divide. It's meant to keep you so busy that you're just trying to just make it to the next day and not plan for next week or next year or 10 years from now. You know, so, you know, kudos to you for having so many roadblocks and you still power through. It's like, you know, there's a roadblock there, but I can go around it. You know,
Right.
this is on the road, but I'm paving my own path and I dictate my future. You're not just gonna impose your will on me and say, based on what you've seen thus far, you're gonna compare me to everything else and say, no, you can't do that. You know, and to show, you know, kids, relatives, friends, family that look what I did. I made my own way, and I wasn't bound by these limitations that were set on me. It's truly commendable, and if more people did it instead of living in comfort and just being uncomfortable for a small percentage of your life, a quarter, a third of your life, if you're uncomfortable to be able to survive the rest, that's a beautiful thing.
And look, even in the craft, before I hand it off to Brother Rene, you know, if there's Masons watching this in other jurisdictions, you know, whether that be Illinois, Florida, Connecticut, and you're not happy with what your jurisdiction is doing, you're not happy with what your lodge is doing, you know, be brave enough to step out. Be brave enough to be different. I mean, I hear a lot of brothers complain like, "Oh, I don't like this, I don't like that." Okay, but what are you actively doing to change that?
Holding anybody accountable.
Yeah. So, you know, I think the great thing about Masonry is that it gives us an opportunity to change, to build that temple, to make it perfect. But you got to go out there and do it. Nobody's just going to hand it to you, right? Like, so if you want to see change, fight. Just like we all did, right? For the creation of Agüeybaná. We said, look, this is what we want to do. I'm going to plantar bandera. It wasn't easy. You know, we all had to spend money, time away from our family, but we had that vision and we wanted to see it done. So to the brothers out there, like, if, you know, we hope that we can inspire other brothers to fight for the change they want to see. And, you know, that was the whole purpose too.
Well, to play off of that, if I could real quick, my brother, definitely fight 1,000%, but first learn. You have to learn what this is about. Learn and be good at what you do. You know, you said you came into a Greek lodge first. You didn't try to impose your will and say, no, this doesn't. You know, you learned, you fit in, you got acclimated to how everything is. It's one thing to say, but it's another thing, like you pointed out, to have somebody listen. If what you're saying is falling on deaf ears, then there's no way that you're going to influence any type of change. Understand the person that you're speaking to. Understand whether it be at work or anything, you know, have a conversation, understand how this person understands, and then don't try to deliver it in a way that you understand. Learn their language. Learn what is a trigger word. Learn how you're gonna put this person in listening mode. You don't always have to be right, but you have to present a conversation that is gonna birth, again, what you want at the end of the day. So have those conversations. Understand, you know, how did you make it? How would you do it? Hey, if I wanted to do this, how would you go about it? You know? And now, whatever you make happen, they gave you advice. They're actually winning too, because they can come back and say, well, I helped them do that. And you can say that because at the end of the day, I still got what I wanted. And that's the goal, the vision, you know? And that's, again, to just touch on what you guys did. You guys were in love with the vision, not about the legacy, the individual legacy, because that comes. And you might not live to hear it, but it's going to come, you know? What were you going to say, my brother?
So what both of you said is going to touch on both. Because first we're going to learn this thing that we call masonry, this beautiful system of morality, right? That's veiled in allegory. We learn it. Then there comes a time where what we learn, you're like, you know what? This lodge or this place is not where I want to be right now. So when you say fight, right? Why fight? This thing is not supposed to be to fight. It's supposed to be smooth. You know, we supposed to be doing things better, right? You travel someplace else, you may want to go someplace else. So do you stay? Now I put the question, do you stay and fight? Or do you go someplace and build what you want to build? You go where there's a home, right? Where you feel at home, like, yo, I like this. This is what I like, right? Not that you don't like the other place, but you just change. Like, you know what, I'm not feeling that. I just want something different, right? So when we say we fight, now we want to fight for the community. Yes, that's different, right? We want to fight for our people. That's different, right? We want to fight to be heard on all levels, whether it's in the church, in our lodge, in Congress, on TV, whether on sports, whatever we want, we want to be present, right? Now I can see for fighting for that, but a place that we call home, do you want to fight?
Yeah.
When is it time to you know, Jay got a song, Lost Ones, where he said, I should have been divorced, right? I should have been, right? Like Ben and J-Lo, remember he said, I should have been divorced, right? Because that's when he was going through his situation with Dame and that business of Rockefeller Records. Right? He knew he wasn't supposed to be there. It was time to go, right? In a relationship, there's a time to go.
Right? You outgrow your surroundings.
You outgrow your surroundings, right? And I don't want to, not that it's negative, but you change. The only thing constant in the world, right? The only one thing constant in the world, change. Everything changes, no matter what it is.
Yeah. And we're supposed to be, as men, you're creators. You're vehicles of creation. Fact. Constant creation, constant evolution. And if you're in the same place you were yesterday, you're not doing a good job.
It's impossible.
It is.
That's impossible to be in the same place as yesterday, right? You can't.
Time's going to keep going.
Time keeps going. Everything changed. So do we fight and try to keep the same or build and keep moving forward?
Keep building, yeah. I mean, the fight, like, I was just looking for a quote. That's why you heard my phone. I wasn't being rude, I promise. But no matter how good you are, if you're in the wrong place, you're worthless, you know? And it's true. You know, you want to be in a place where you can create, you know, what fills you. Because if you're not being used,
you're useless.
You're useless.
Yes.
You know, and you want to be used more. So that's, you know, a lot of times people, or men, even men, I hear them complaining, oh, I'm being used. This guy's using me. I feel used. Well, that's the point. That's the point.
And with Agüeybaná, like, we got brothers. Look, we got a brother that came up with an idea. Like, he didn't feel heard, right? And he's like, yo, why don't we do a boat ride? We're like, boat ride? All right, let's bring it to the works. Works said, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Like, so we found out the money is going to cost a lot, right? It's going to cost that the lodge wouldn't make no money. But the work said, it's not about the lodge making money. It's about the camaraderie. It's about the fraternalism. Right. It's about the brothers chilling with each other.
We'll figure it out.
Well, the money, each person pay for themselves, but we're together, and we're going to rock together, that we could at least build that bond, continue to build this bond that we have, right? The important part, right, what I looked at was like, damn, this brother, you know, he's from the South Bronx. He's a good dude, good brother, but he felt heard. He felt like this is what masonry did for him. Made him feel heard, made him feel like important, like what he says counts. That's what the lodge is giving brothers, right? We're giving brothers the opportunity to be heard, to be felt, right? When in outside of the world, maybe in our jobs, in our everyday lives,
You're just a
we-
number.
we're just a number. We don't feel heard. But in masonry, it gives us that opportunity to be heard, to be respected as a man.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify one point, and then I'll hand it over. You know, when I say fight, this is like what Pac said. It's like, I don't mean to pick up a gun or to engage in some physical confrontation. What I'm saying is to use our mind as a weapon for change, right? If you look out through the whole course of history, nothing has happened in society, right, that hasn't been because somebody has struggled, right? It's just like what Frederick Douglass said, you know, you don't become a skilled sailor, you know, sailing in smooth waters. That is what defines human beings. We struggle, right? Life is not perfect. Society is not perfect. There's injustices. But what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And that's what I hope that the message is, that, you know, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now when we're all gone, that whoever picks up the mantle and wants to run with this lodge, that they are inspired by that, and they can know that they can make a change.
I mean, that's what my whole channel is about. I mean, I have a lot of masonry and Masonic subjects that we touch, and you know, a lot of the interviews have been Masons, and that's just because our values are in line. But I don't know if you've seen the "We the Problem," right? A lot of people think it's like a sports thing. Oh, we're the problem, but it's not. It's about self-accountability. And just to play off of what you said, it's not about fight with your mind. I mean, it is about fight with your mind. I agree with that. But to add to that, it's also about fight with your mind, but feel with your heart. You know, when we're in the incubation stage, when a fetus is first conceived, the heart is the first organ to, you know, be made. And for like, I don't know how many weeks or whatever it may be, then the brain is formed. So the heart is really the first thing that God touches and creates, and then the mind comes. And the mind can be changed, and you could be, you know, fooled into action and injustices or accomplishments or things of positive nature. But, you know, if you feel it in your heart and whatever's in your mind is in line with your heart, go great. Like go for it, because if you're well intentioned, then, you know, just go for it. Again, intention. If the intention is good, you know, I'll die on that hill. I don't mind it. You know, I'll look like a fool if it doesn't happen, or if, you know, people don't agree with it. But it's important to stick to your values, your morals, your ethics, everything. And, you know, if you don't accomplish it right now, you might inspire the next guy to do it that way. And again, with the organization, I was a worshipful master for 2 years, and a lot of times we were talking about it before, you know, guys would have an idea, and I'm like, let's do it. How you gonna do it? You know, and they used to call me the good idea fairy. Oh, here we go. He's got an idea. Somebody else is gonna do it now. But that's the goal. You know, I'm teaching you how this organization works and how to get things done, because when I first came up, a lot of times you were met with, no, we've never done it that. We've always done it this way. And, you know, again, having those conversations that build trust. And wait a minute, this kid's got something. Let's see what he does. It's not crazy. You know, what's the worst that could happen? And, you know, to get somebody to buy into your brand, and then to see your ideas come to fruition. And then you start impacting the craft certain ways, and then you're building trust. And wait, we didn't build, or we didn't get a lot of money in charity, but the brothers had a great time, the families had a great time. We're building memories here. This is camaraderie, you know. And from doing it, we learn how to do it better. The hardest thing is getting the yes. So, you know, I'm in a position to give the yes. Now you're in a position to make it happen. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure it out, you know, better next time. But to keep doing that, and, you know, you guys are doing a great job. And to touch on the Frederick Douglass quote, you said a skilled sailor was never, what was it again?
A skilled sailor, skill set doesn't become skilled in smooth water.
Right.
You know, you gotta, you know, adversity builds character, and I think that's something that all connects us, because you know, we didn't come from a background where it was like, you know, we had a golden spoon, and you know, we saw the underbelly of society. We saw things that a lot of people in masonry probably haven't seen. So that informed the way that we act, how we think, and so you know, we're just trying to build character. And you know, that I think that in Agüeybaná, the reason why we've been so successful is because we've had a lot of good men that have stood up, that you know, have done the work, who've done the ritual work. So you know, we plan to continue to change minds.
I'm gonna give you two quotes, sailor inspired quotes. You know, like, hey, you'll see it. I'm sure you saw it before, but you know, a lot of people will sink a ship because they can't be captain. And it's so true. It's so true. Oh, you know, it's not my time. It's not your time. Your time is coming though. Just learn. And then the other one is, you know, all the water in the world can't sink a ship unless you let it get in the ship. And you guys are doing a good job at keeping the water out, so and keeping this whole thing afloat. I'm gonna hand it over to Rene. This is what, your third episode that you've been on?
Yes.
Your fan favorite?
Yeah, it's like my third episode.
So go ahead, brother.
I won't get too far in my childhood because we will be here forever. But
I think that was on the last episode too.
Yeah, it was
Everybody
on the
knows
last
that
episode.
one.
But just like Will, you know, his father grew up with 13 siblings. I'm a you know, sibling of 13. You know, and my mother was born in Puerto Rico. My dad, you know, grew up in Puerto Rico. So in my household, everything was Puerto Rican. Everything was Hector Lavoe. Everything was Jibaro music. Everything was Vix. You know, Acanfol. You know, so you know, that's all I ever grew up, was being Puerto Rican in a neighborhood where it was just blacks and Puerto Ricans. You know, so you know, I look back now, I'm happy of my childhood because I remember the Scully, playing Scully, you know, on the block, making, you know, playing basketball in the milk crate, playing dominoes. I miss those days, and I always tell the kids now, like my stepdaughter, I said, you know, back in my day, it was so much fun. We used to. Now the kids are on the computers, you know, and they don't get wingworms no more. Yeah. It's true, you know. I've never. They don't get wingworms no more like we used to do. We used to get wingworms all the time, you know. And
it was the Vicks. I'm telling you, the Vicks, definitely the Vicks. Or the Manteca de Ubre.
Yeah.
Little Robitussin doesn't hurt.
So I remember those days, you know, and I'll be honest with you, I look back, I'm very lucky and I'm very fortunate because I come from a place where I wasn't very fortunate to have everything, you know, and I always tell people everything I've thought about and manifested. You know, it is a saying, subconsciousness is amenable to suggestion. What that means that everything you think about, you can manifest, and it will come true.
Perception
it might not
creates
come
reality.
Exactly, and it may not come in now. It could come maybe 5 years from now, maybe in 2 years from now. You know, in my family, I've always been the weird one because I've always wanted to learn things that no one wanted to learn. Or, you know, coming from a family of Puerto Ricans, you know, for them, learning tarot is brujeria.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
And I've always been the weird one. You know, to this day, my brothers kind of make fun of me a little bit. You know, they think everything I talk about is weird. And my response to them is, a bird that lives in a cage thinks flying is weird. You know?
Love that.
And it's very true, you know? So you know, his response, what do you mean? I said, you live in a cage. You know, you have to expand your wings, you know, look at different areas.
It goes back to teaching those boundaries that I was saying.
Exactly.
You're taught that.
Exactly, and it's just that you're still ignorant to these things, you know. So I've always been a fan of learning everything, you know. My father, who was a hero of mine, you know, it was because of him I got into martial arts at an early age and learning these types of mysticism and spirituality, you know. And martial arts, I've always been a very sports kid, coming from my brothers, you know, coming with a lot of brothers, older brothers, and I wanted to be an NBA player. You know, even though I was born and raised in East New York, in Coney Island, everything was basketball. I grew up in Coney Island, you know. In my time, it's Stephon Marbury, and I learned all my sports in Coney Island, and I wanted to be an NBA player, and I was was nice. You know, I was in the N1 team. And unfortunately, you know, I moved out of Coney Island. I went to Ridgewood. And, you know, other circumstances, I won't get in touch with that one. But my first approach into the mysticism was the knowledge of self, being around people in the neighborhoods who was Nation of Islam and stuff like that. And my grandfather, my dad's dad, he used to work for a boss who was in the cheese factory. I don't know if you ever heard of this cheese called Viajero cheese. It's a Puerto Rican cheese, and he has like a Hiboro hat with a horse. It's a white cheese. Yep. My grandfather used to own the business of that cheese in Red Hook. Yeah. Wow. So, I used to go to Red Hook all the time in the factory and get free cheese. In his house, he had his boss's 33-degree Scottish Mason certificate that his boss gave to him, you know, trusted him, you know. And that was the first time I've ever seen that. And I asked my grandfather, what is that? I said, so, mi jefe es mason. I was like, what? You know, I didn't know what it was. But to me, I grew up learning more of the conspiracy theories. That was my first route. Yeah. And the first book I've ever read was a book called The Pale Horse. I don't know if you ever heard of that book. And back in my time, you couldn't even read that outside because it was so much of a conspiracy theory, so you can't read that outside because it has some things in there, you know?
Wasn't the main conspiracy theory that you had to give your social security to the government to buy the book?
His name was William Cooper. That was his name. Yeah, the Pale Horse, you know? And
he held the pale white horse.
The Pale White Horse. There you go, yeah. And that was my first interaction with that. And I've always been a reader. That was my thing, you know? And martial arts, I don't know why. My mother thinks I get it from her mother, from her mom. But I've always been into that kind of I would say the mysticism part of it. You know, as a kid, I wanted to be a priest. You know, I was really good. My mother was very active in teaching me biblical things. You know, she would read me the Bible when I was a kid. And at one point, I wanted to be a priest. But I was playing ball. I was doing martial arts, you know. And as I got older, learning science, I kind of went into the atheism part a little bit because the science kind of opened me up into a different path. And there's a saying that when you're young, you're born into the church, but when you get older, you get away from the church because you get into the esoteric part. When you discover the esoteric part or the occultism part, it kind of changes your vision. Right. You know, they call that the Isis unveil. You know, that your sight become unveiled now into learning the true meanings of what the New Testament and those church things. And then later on, you go back right to the church because now you know the true meanings of those the scriptures, right, and etc.
There's a quote. It's like you know, you get religion first, right? But then a little bit of science brings you away from God. Exactly. But a lot of bit of science brings you back.
There you go. You see? So that's exactly how it happened to me, you know? So, but everything, like I said, everything I've thought about, I manifest. My first, you know, I've always been, when I got older, I started reading about Taino history.
Oh, man, I love that.
And my first person was an individual when AOL, the first, you know, when the AOL was very popular, when the internet was, the guy was, he passed away. And I read about him, and his name was Pedro Guanaqueyu Torres. He was from Orocovi. And he used to say that people from Guayanilla or Rodriguez, de Perez, are related to Agüeybaná and things like that. But me reading about him for years on the internet, when I think I was 16, I was researching a Puerto Rican history. That was my thing. In my 20s, I met him. Like I said, I've thought about him, I researched him, and I met him. And I was getting really deep into the Taino history, and I was getting into the mysticism part. The first person to introduced me to that was a guy named Jordan Maxwell. I don't know if you heard of him before. Yeah. He was a guy that got me into like the Manly P. Hall and things. So I've always got into that. So I will go into the Indigenous Day of Remembrance on Columbus Day and 59th Street every day and get involved with the Taino community. And then I became a researcher for the Taino community. You know, one of my closest friends, he's a top Taino researcher, was working at the Smithsonian in Bowling Green. Oh, wow. And me and him worked together, and we wrote a book. He wrote a book on Taino history. Now, I wasn't a Mason yet, you know. I was joined other esoteric orders. I didn't never want to be a Mason because I was told that there was nothing, no esotericism there, you know. Until one of my mentors, named Tom Worrell, told me, it depends who you meet, you know. So Masonry has always been in the back of my head. So there was a group on Facebook called Adept Initiates. There was a guy named NEXT. You can research him, you can Google him. He does a lot of Egyptian tours. I started writing for his blog, and it was the biggest esoteric Facebook group probably in the whole Facebook. It was about 13 years ago, 14 years ago. And I write blogs for him, esoteric stuff. And there was a man I met named Richard Casaro, a well-known Masonic author. And he asked me, are you a Mason? I said, no. He said, you should join. I said, I don't know the process. But I said, I'm in part of other things that's very similar. So he said, I'm coming to New York. I'm going to do a lecture. You should come through. So he came down to the Grand Lodge. I seen his lecture. And I said, you know what, maybe I'll see what happens. So the first lodge I was joined was a lodge called America's Lodge. I think it was called America's Lodge. I seen it. They had a fellowship night. It was cool, but it wasn't really for me, you know. So I contacted him. I said, what's the lodge you from? He said, George Washington Lodge. And that's how I ended up to George Washington Lodge 285, okay. You know. And, but then again, like I said, everything I've thought and manifested. Martial arts has always been my thing. The first film one of my first martial arts film I was a kid, I was like, I want to do was Above the Law.
I thought you were going to say Rush Hour.
No, not Rush Hour.
I was going to say The Last Dragon.
No. The Last Dragon too, yeah, because the Bruce Lee was my hero. And not because he was a martial artist, because his mind. I've always been inspired. And this might sound nerdy, but Einstein was my idol when I was like 14. Not because of that, because he was his mind. And Bruce Lee has always been my hero. So watching that Above the Law scene when he saw this old man, I told my dad, I said, Papi, I want to do some martial arts. When I got older, I got the chance to train with one of the teachers who trained him.
Wow.
You know, and I manifested that because I had it in my mind, you know. And after that, I got into other branch of martial arts style, watching this movie about Masoyama, who was Kyokushin, the founder of Kyokushin, by watching a movie about Masoyama, because my brother-in-law studied Kyokushin. And it turned out I met a teacher who was his predecessor, his student. So
it's amazing how that works.
Yeah. And then I wanted to be an actor since I was a kid. I always wanted to do acting. I ended up doing the movies, you know, been in FBI, Law and Order.
Right.
I manifested that, you know. Now, Masonry, I always wanted to do lectures, and now I do lectures in Masonry, you know. I became a Master Mason at 33, at age 33. That was 8 years ago now. And it's very a fascinating journey. And what's beautiful about Masonry, my best friends are in the craft. And I feel like my closest friends are in Masonry because we all took that same obligation.
Yeah.
You know?
The closeness.
Closeness, yeah. And there's a saying in the esoteric world, it's to will, to dare, to seek, and to be silent. You know? And these are the 4 pillars on the craft.
I mean, it's
you know?
to like we had mentioned it before. You would while I was setting up, you guys are doing karate in the background, which is pretty cool. I've never seen that before, but you know, most people walk around life trying to impose their views, their values, and you know, they're right. But the right way to approach it is to be a dry sponge and to soak in as much as possible. And you know what you're touching on, in order to manifest, that's how you gotta walk through life. You gotta be empty first, open. You know, you can't be so set in your ways where that's not how it is. That conflicts with my belief. You know, to approach life with an open mind, that's the way to do it, in my opinion.
And my thing is, I always wanted to represent the Puerto Rican culture. I've been the Taino culture, everything to me was Puerto Rican since I was a kid, because my father embedded that in me. You know, he was a musician, you know, and, you know, it's interesting because, you know, there's a saying that humans are like wicks. Everyone has a wick on them. It's just that they haven't been lighting up yet. You know what I mean? And as a kid, I had to grow up very quickly, very fast. And I think that kind of helped me get into the other paths more easily, into the esoteric part of it, because I had teachers around me in that circle already. You know, I come from already a fraternal brotherhood, my family. You know, I had that camaraderie already with my family and things like that. So with Agüeybaná, you know, when he first approached this, we wanted to have that same camaraderie, that brotherhood, and bring our kids around so that when we get old, they already know each other. That's the plan, you know. And, you know, it's interesting because the Galito Barreto, who's the deputy grandmaster, I didn't know he was gonna be the deputy grandmaster, and I was already friends with him on Facebook, and I met him and stuff. And when I told him about this, he was so supportive. And one of the plans for the lodge is to have the Bible come from Puerto Rico, to have that main light. And he says, "All right, I got it." When we had the installations, he surprised me. He had that Bible with that symbol on the Bible. He custom made it for us.
Wow.
You know, and then he says, when you get the number, you bring it back to me, and I put the number. It's in Puerto Rico right now, so he's actually customizing the number to it, 1198.
It belonged to another lodge in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, so this flag originally was to represent, it's inverted, but it's a little different here, but originally it's supposed to represent a Masonic apron like this. And I got this from a friend named, I want to put his name there because he's the one that actually gave me the permission to use it. His name is Jose Hiram Rosado. He got his own podcast. And originally I had one of his old symbols with the darker blue. And when they decided what symbol can we use, I said, I think I have an idea. Let's use the original light blue flag. But I wanted to invert it so it could look like a Masonic apron with that symbol. And I contacted him. I said, it'd be okay if I use it. We put your name on there, and you the creator, but I just wanna, he gave me permission to do it.
That's beautiful. Now I want to touch on. Oh, go ahead, brother. Yeah, do you think?
Yeah. And you know, when we came together, I think Right Worshipful Tim was the one that came up with the idea. The Guayabera. We looked at the Masonic code. We looked at the Constitution and said, "Oh, you don't need to wear a tuxedo. You don't need to wear a suit." It says. Forgot what language they used exactly, but it was like something that's like decent or respectable to the lodge. So, Right Worshipful Tim was like, "Well, why don't we wear the Guayabera?"
I love that.
And the Guayabera for us has become a Masonic symbol of resilience and our culture and, you know, where we come from. Because, you know, for the viewers that don't know, the Guayabera is considered formal attire in Puerto Rico. And the other thing we did, I think, was actually we took Right Worshipful Tim's machete. The Tyler has a machete instead of a sword.
It's a Puerto Rican wooden machete.
Oh, I love that.
Right, and Brother Rene also, you know, we decided to do a chamber of reflection. Brother Rene was the one that created ours because we felt that, you know, if they do it in Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico has Scottish Rite Symbolic Lodge, so their setup is a little bit different. So Brother Rene was at the helm of that. We also do a chain of union that Rene does a prayer in Spanish. So there was like little tidbits that we included, you know, to manifest our Puerto Ricanness that was within the bounds of Masonry. So
can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Can the gavels be pilons? Or
Well,
is that the
nah,
don't tell me.
Well, check this out. There's a guy in Puerto Rico, the Grand Artisan. He actually handmade our gavels from Puerto Rico.
Wow.
So those gavels, he said it every time we bang, that is the sound of Puerto Rico. So it's handmade from him from Puerto Rico. And another thing, the Worshipful Master doesn't wear a typical Worshipful Master hat. He wears a sombrero hat, a Puerto Rican version.
That's
you
amazing.
know? And his idea was the bow tie. Because I think in Rhode Island, the Spanish lodge over there, they use the guayabera on bow ties.
Yeah.
You know.
I got to get one now.
Yeah.
Now, before we close that out, I just want to touch, because we're talking Puerto Rico. Name a moment when you were younger that you were just like, you saw something, you're like, wow, I'm just so proud to be Puerto Rican right now. Give me like one event that you witnessed, whatever it may be.
It's a great. When I was younger, or I can say like in present that I'm older now.
Whatever.
Okay.
Whatever. I remember the first time. I could start it off.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
gotta get it. So, you know, you're in the mix. You're around your family. You're in the neighborhood or whatever. And you're just like, wow, I'm just so proud right now. And I was watching. I love boxing, and I remember that the Tito De La Hoya fight.
Oh yeah.
And to see the crowd at Madison Square Garden, and you just see all the Puerto Rican flags and everybody going crazy when he won that fight. I was sitting back. I'm like, wow, this is something I've never seen before. Like, I remember the Puerto Rican Day parades in Bushwick, and there's flags on the power lines, there's flags hanging out of every window. I remember seeing that, hearing the music, the parade, the cars going. Like, I remember all of that. And it's just, that's normal. But when you're sitting on TV and you're like, wow, look at Madison Square Garden, it's just Puerto Rican flags just flooding the crowds. I was just like, wow, I'm just so proud to just be Puerto Rican at this moment in time. That's for me. I don't even remember how old I was at that point. I was young. But that was like one of those moments where I was just like, wow.
It's, I can't say when, because it was already embedded in me to always be proud already.
Of course.
There's a saying, I remember, the song by Ghostface, I Always Love You, when he created his mom's. That song is the same exact as my childhood was. And there's a saying that he says at the end when he goes, never forget where you come from, because you lose the essence, the reality of yourself, and my father always embedded that in me.
Yeah.
And so since a child, I've always been in the parade, in the festival, being in the car with the flag on, with the song on, playing Preciosa by, that song to this day gives me goosebumps, and Hector Lavoe. But one of the proud moments, to be honest with you, for me, was when Oscar Lopez, when he came out of jail a couple of years ago. He was one of those guys that, I think in the Puerto Rican parade, they were trying to ban him. I became one of the bodyguards for him. And I remember being in the Bronx and in Maestro, and it was like 100 Puerto Ricans there.
Yeah.
And we did the Puerto Rican Borinquen, the Borinquen, the Borinquen anthem. And it was that right there made me go, wow, I am very proud.
It's like the world sees us,
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by, like, not proud, because, again, I'm very proud, but I was never not proud. But at that moment in time, I was like, wow, the world sees us. You know what I mean? Like, we're represented on the grand stage.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
So, yeah.
And I guess this is a shameless plug, but we're gonna walk in the Puerto Rican Day Parade this coming Sunday, June 8th, and we got dispensation from our district deputy to come out with Masonic regalia. So we hope to bring as many Masons out as we can. But I gotta say, like I said, my mother was always in the arts, and just seeing how people, just thinking about how Puerto Ricans have impacted so many fields, right? Whether that's the arts, science, business, music, especially with Bad Bunny right now, that's kind of taking the world by storm. And his last album, that was pretty Puerto Rican centric, but I remember as a kid going to the Puerto Rican Day Parade, and you're just like, wow, man, what an event, and you looking down Fifth Avenue, and it was nothing but Puerto Rican flags, and it was like there was such a energy there that was kind of indescribable. But particular moments, that's kind of hard. I mean, I remember watching the Tito fights, and every time he won, it was like people took off from work, and it was crazy, and I mean, I think for such a small island, geographically, 100 by 35,
impact.
The impact has been enormous. So we hope to continue in that tradition, and we hope that Agüeybaná could fill those shoes. And we know we got a lot of work to do, but we hope that we could leave our imprint as Masons here in New York and in Puerto Rico as well.
Amen. Well, brother, I know it's been a while. You guys awake over there?
I guess you could probably say, from the age of birth to 11, I've always been nothing but New York Rican. Just knew the Puerto Ricans in New York. Family, maybe we had some in Jersey, Pennsylvania, but always New York, New York. And at the age of 12, I went to the island for the first time with my grandmother, my aunt, and my cousin. And, me and Victor talk about this every year when we go to the Grand Session of Puerto Rico. It's like something about when your feet touch that soil, there's something that just burns in you. And to me, that was my moment of like, yo, I'm Puerto Rican. And then, it took a while for me to get back to the island. But now it's like, something about just going there, that call home, even though, New York ride or die, but there's just something about being there, that energy the island gives you. And even, wherever you're at in the world, you just think back and you feel that your people are there, So for me, that big moment was that first time landing there at the age of 12. Still remember it, running up and down at Yunque, swimming with the fishes and vieques, all that stuff. I don't think you could do it nowadays, but one prized possession I have that I was able to get away with, I was actually able to take a full-fledged seashell back with me from one of the beaches in Vieques, and I have it at home. And like I said, I highly encourage do not do that nowadays, especially with TSA. This was early 2000s, but, to me, that's my biggest moment was at the age of 12, setting foot there for the first time, and then be able to come back at the age of 12 with that piece that, is from the island.
Love it, brother. How about you, brother?
Well, for me, it's not one particular moment. It's repeated. It's repeated daily. Like, yo, I'm proud to be Puerto Rican. Puerto Black. I say, yo soy Puerto Moreno, right? I'm just a indigenous person. I'm a person through my heritage. I love both my heritage, right? But I could remember going to the Puerto Rican Day Parade. I didn't live in Manhattan. We came from the Bronx. We came from Brooklyn, taking that train, and how deep the train was just with Puerto Ricans. And, we partying. Some people that are not part of our community probably were scared because the trains were bananas. It's just music and the liveness. I loved it. When you go down Fifth Ave, how many people were there. Then, of course, Tito, Trinidad knocking everybody out. Also Kodo, right? He's a little more reserved. That also Big Pun. Pun came out with that Boricua, Morena. It's putting us on the map. And like they said, that little island of 3.5 million. Off the island, there's probably about another 3. New York had a million. But what a big impact it did to the world. Wherever we at, they know we here, right? Hasta la luna, somos boricua, estamos presente, right? We taking that flag, we're gonna rep it everywhere. When I take my daughter to that island, she's been going since she was in the womb. My wife is from Puerto Rico, from Ponce, born in San Juan and raised in Ponce. So we always gotta go. We always go back multiple times a year. We always did. And when my daughter says, no, I don't want to go back to New York. I want to stay here. No, I don't. But it's because she's a baby. She loves the beach. It's that. She loves being over there. It's her knowing her culture, her growing, dancing bomba. Like, she's been dancing since the womb. She dances, she sings, and seeing that we're continuing our culture. So when you say, what's the proudest moment? It's every time I see one of us do something, right? Anytime I see a Boricua do something, because it's so small. America got 400 million people. And then you got bodies out there repping. Yeah. The boxers, Amanda Serrano, the sisters, right? Knocking people out on the world class, like fighting all around the world. The sisters out there getting busy. Rappers from the birth of hip hop, right? That's all over the world. Hip hop. Bodies were there. Yeah. Right? Masonry, the body is there. Right? We everywhere. So there's always a new time that I'm like, damn, that's the body. That makes me proud to be Boricua. Every time I wake up, I'm like, oh, this is dope. I love this. And it's Boricua, Black, American, right? To be born here, to be born with what we have, and be a Mason, right? And then when another one was, we started this lodge. We get that charter, like, oh, snap. And this is on a Masonic world level. Yeah. We're places, and I could show you text messages. Yo, I'm proud of what y'all did. Thank you. They're like, yo, there was the brother, I put him on, he's on Tyler. And he was like, he never thought that, he dreamt of it and never thought that this would happen. And it happened, right? We got brothers in Florida. Right? We've been places that, oh, you part of the lodge. Oh, man, I always wanted him, and I'm proud of that. How can I join?
Yeah.
Like, whoa, hold on a second. This is what we got to do, right? But all over the world, we're getting calls from all over the country, right? That, yes, we're proud of what you're doing. We like that. How can we do it? What can we do? How can we be part of this? So, yes, Agüeybaná. So that question is a good question. You see, you got us talking.
Right.
But it's all the time. It's all the time that we're
Amen.
proud to be Boricua.
And before we close out, if I could build on what Worshipful Will said, look, I think in terms of milestones, right? We got dispensation, and we thank the Grand Master for that. Our Grand Master, Stephen Adam Rubin. We got a charter which was given to us actually by the whole body of Masonry at the annual communication. But I think one of the most special times that I felt was the first time that we visited, right, Worshipful Tim, Worshipful Will, and myself, we visited the Grand Lodge of Puerto Rico for their, well, I think they do quarterlies in Puerto Rico, but it was their Grand Lodge meeting. And I remember Tim and I, we were late, and they were calling me like, hey, where you guys at? You know, where you guys at? So when we get there, the Grand Master tells us to stand west of the altar. He comes down, the Grand Master of Puerto Rico, Aníbal, and presents us a symbolic charter. And this was in front of all of, the worshipful masters in Puerto Rico, all of the visitors. And that to me was like, wow. Like, and this was before, I think maybe we had gotten dispensation already. But to me, again, that was like that feeling where you're like,
You represent.
wow, the Grand Lodge of Puerto Rico, right? That 3-4 years ago we were unknown, felt so moved by what we were doing that they gave us a symbolic charter. That to us was like, wow, that really cemented that what we were doing was the right thing. And in terms of being a Mason and Puerto Rican, I think that was one of the most proudest moments that I had. Together with receiving obviously the charter here, but. We weren't expecting it, so I guess it was like
worthy. I mean, more than worthy of it. I mean, there's probably a gazillion brothers that have had this idea, and my beliefs are that ideas are living entities, right? They go from person to person, and then they'll talk to you. It pops in your head, man. That's a good idea. I think I'm gonna do it, and you kind of procrastinate, you don't do it, you don't really execute anything, and then it gets tired of you, and it goes to the next person, and to be worthy of that idea and to execute it from start to finish, I mean, that's got to be something that you guys are just eternally proud for. I mean, it says a lot. You guys made it happen. You made it happen for a whole island
Even that
that
Grand
has
Lodge.
to have representation in another state.
Another country.
To have a home in another state, another country, that's crazy.
And the vibe that we got, right, when they presented the symbolic charter, right, and they got to speak in Spanish. Vic speaks it. He speaks mira real good. Me, I told him, my Spanish not very good looking, pero meto mano también. And I'm speaking, and they understood where we were coming from. They didn't know say it in English, but out of respect, I'm going to say it in Spanish, right? And I said it. But when they gave us that, and they see Agüeybaná, they gave us a standing ovation, right? The love that they gave us, that's all three of us are there, and they're clapping for us, and they're proud of us. They're shaking our hands. When I come to New York, I want to come over there. I can show you a text right now. I got brothers from Widow Sons that are over there that are coming June 26th. They want to come over here. They asking, for connects over here, where they could stay, what could they do, right? Where take them around and stuff like that. But it's the connection that we have.
Right.
They're reaching out to us. They're proud to have their brothers over here.
Amen.
And with the symbolic charter, for those that may be confused of what that is, it's pretty much a version of honorary membership. So honorary membership is the individual to the lodge. The symbolic lodge charter is the honorary version of the lodge to their jurisdiction.
Right.
And it's been with, open arms, with Puerto Rico. When we got our Grand Lodge of New York charter, the body was so overwhelmed and happy, they almost forgot to vote.
Wow.
They were ready to, hey, the books are good. Here's your charter. And, you had that one guy back there, which I'm not angry about because I am very big on protocol and etiquette. Like, hold on, but, the body has to vote first. The applause, like Worshipful Will said, the standing ovations, that came before the actual business part because everybody was sitting on the edge of their seat.
Right.
So it's just nice to see that, since birth, it's been, all love.
Right.
A lot of people always used to ask me why Puerto Ricans are proud to wave the flag. At one point it was illegal to wave the flag in Puerto Rico.
It was literally against the law.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we do it. We're very proud every single day, and we ever since we started this lodge, we have so much awards. We even had a proclamation from the Bronx president. Now every October 24th is Agüeybaná Lodge Day. As the first Puerto Rican lodge.
Wow.
A symbolic charter. We had a brother who created a apron. His wife in Puerto Rico, Javier. His wife was a professional seamstress. I can show you the picture. She created a beautiful apron that looks like the Puerto Rican flag without symbol in it in the shadow box. Amazing. It was very unexpected,
Yeah.
So I think this was probably one of the most proudest moments of doing this, actually, and getting that charter in my life as a Puerto Rican. This really is up there for me, and it's the proudest moment ever for me. Because to do it with my brothers, with my closest friends, it's been a really amazing journey,
Again, salute to you guys. You guys are keeping the culture alive. You're keeping those memories. I mean, I said it before, in an era where they're trying to blend lines. Like I'm all for it, cool. Like inclusion, I love it, but there should be something said for individual culture to be revered. Not to be. It breeds people understanding. Like there's so much separation in the world that they try to blend everything out. Right? America's a melting pot, but to honor culture and to honor those things that actually make us different and to celebrate it. I remember going to school back in the day and smelling like food. I'm like, oh, what is that? It's like that's culture that a lot of people don't understand. And to be able to share those experiences and talk about your childhood or the adulthood and keep those traditions alive, the things that make us different, the things that make us special, it's again a big honor, and I'm glad you're doing it, and I'm proud to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Closing thoughts.
Look, we appreciate you taking your Sunday. Thank you so much for having us. And, on behalf of Agüeybaná, we thank you for giving us a platform where we could, share the mission of our lodge. And I'd like to thank the brothers, too, for coming out today. And, we're very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Signing off.
I always say that, we all worked hard at this together. You know how when you make Puerto Rican rice, that top rice ain't the best. It's that big owl,
That's
supposedly, and we that big owl,
Yeah.
we all stick together. We the bottom of that rice. And we all came up with some creative ideas, man. And thank you for having me, brother.
I
Really.
mean,
Really
anytime.
dope. Yeah,
anytime.
of course, man. Thank you so much,
Anytime.
man. Really.
Thank you for having us. I got one. Estamos activos, estamos presentes, estamos afuera. Que Dios nos bendiga a nosotros, a la isla, a los masones. We active, we outside. Thank you, my brother. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you for
brother.
having us and letting us express ourselves freely and
course.
represent.
Of course. It's my honor.
Yeah, thank you once again. Everyone said, what I was thinking. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I hope that those watching can take away what they can from it. And just remember, Masonry is here to grow. We're here to learn. That's the most important thing. That's the first thing we came here to do, was to learn. Because if you're not learning, you're stagnant. And, hopefully, this won't be the last time, but, we're always happy to come back. And whatever you need personally, brother, we're here for you.
I appreciate you guys greatly.
Got the petition if you need it.
Yeah, I'm done in the East. I'm done with a couple other things in my Masonic career, so I'm gonna have a little bit more time. But from the beginning of the day, you guys started off as guests here, and you guys are leaving family, and I appreciate it.
We appreciate
And
that. Thank you.
thank you again for taking time out of your day. You guys drove. I had the easy part. I had to just set up, but you guys took the trip out here. You drove, and I appreciate the time. 2 hours. We're here 2 hours.
Wow.
It's crazy. So thank you again, my brothers.
Thank
Stay
you.
blessed.
Thank you.